Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by thelines.com. I'm Eli Hershkovich. Big episode breaking down the weekend in college hoops. First up, as always, Justin Perri of Shot Quality going to join me to break down the Friday one game to hit on the Friday card, and a big Saturday college basketball slate ahead of the Super Bowl. And then Rocco Miller, bracketologist at bracketeer.org, also hopping on the show to talk about some props on FanDuel Sportsbook regarding March Madness. All right, Justin, let's get into it. Friday night, number 12, St. John's, 20-3, 11-1 in the Big East, coming off of that win and cover against Marquette on Tuesday night at the Garden. At number 19, UConn, 16-6, 8-3 in the Big East. And big news ahead of this matchup, Liam McNeely, the five-star freshman, finally returning after a month-plus long absence. I think he's UConn's most important player if you look at on-off splits per CBB analytics. Opponents averaging 97.1 points per 100 possessions with McNeely on the floor. Off the floor, sitting at 111.9 points per 100 possessions. So UConn's defense takes a hit without McNeely. They get him back Friday night, also shooting just under 38% from deep. What's your handicap here?
Yeah, I played UConn minus the 1.5 last night. Absolutely killed it. I wouldn't go and grab 4.5 right now. Honestly, it's absolutely past the threshold where I'm betting this thing. It's a tough handicap though, I will say, now that it's at the right line. And that's because McNeely coming back is a big deal. But how teams do on like those first 20, 30 possessions when a player's back in the mix, it can sometimes be a little stagnant. It takes time. I'm guessing that UConn and Hurley's coaching and practice style likely leads to a diminished negative factor in a player return because he's so good. And I was talking with a good friend of mine this morning. St. John's, their worst two offensive outputs have come against their two deepest drop coverage defenses. So I'm definitely a little concerned with how they're going to do. They're riding high off the biggest win for the program in the last 20 years at Madison Square Garden. I was there. My voice is just barely back. It was an awesome game down to the final minutes. I mean, Cam Jones probably played himself out of that win, in my opinion. A little reckless early, 2 quick fouls, had to do a lot of offense-defense stuff at the end of the game, and he's their most impactful player. So I'm really interested to see how this one goes tonight. I'm not going to call it MSG North out of, people going to come at me and chirp. But no, obviously this is not going to be a St. John's environment at all. It is going to be massively UConn. I don't know if they're going with the whiteout, but I do expect I do expect it to be pretty tough for a team that missed like 15 free throws to hit their free throws. So finishing is going to be a big deal. But the other side of this thing, I mean, we saw it with Marquette. St. John's can defend. They can defend. And Zuby can go 1 to 5. And so can almost everyone except maybe Davion Smith, right? Who's just a little undersized at the guards. So this team is a problem defensively. They're going to need to get into transition, in my opinion. They're going to also need to get into UConn's face when they're shooting threes. And I'm going to guess it's going to be a heavy dose of 3-point shots for UConn. A lot of variability built into how this one's going to go. Would be shocked to see it come out as a single possession game, fouls and all that. So yeah, I like either side, whichever you're taking, minus a couple points. I would go grab the alt if you like St. John's before I take plus 4.5. I'm more inclined to think they win than they are. If they're going to lose, it might end up being by 9 or 10 points.
Yeah, no, that's a fair take. And you mentioned St. John's elite defense. We also don't know how many minutes McNeely is going to play, what kind of effectiveness and flow he's in his first game back. But St. John's, since January 1st, since the start of the new year, number 1 in Bart Torvik's adjusted defensive efficiency metric, top 10 2-point defense, top 10 block rate, led by Zuby Ejiofor, who you mentioned could switch 1 through 5, and a top 20 turnover rate, opponent's turnover rate. That is, you mentioned UConn's drop coverage, and I do think with Kadari Richmond's tweaked jump shot, which
the
is
mid-range
about a thing,
effectiveness, right?
Yeah, because over the last 5 games, UConn allowing a 52.6% mid-range clip to the opponent. That ranks in the 0 percentile. Opponents have been carving them up in the mid-range. Now, St. John's shooting efficiency, nothing to write home about. 340th in three-point percentage, 288th in free throw percentage. So they've really struggled at the free throw line, missing 14 free throws, as you touched on, against Marquette. 3 of 16 from deep in that one. So if they get down in this game, alt line for UConn certainly in play. But if Kadari's hitting mid-range jump shots, if Davion Smith is a little bit more into a flow himself offensively.
He said he passed the mental hurdle in the Marquette game. I was reading some of the post-game comments. He took a couple hits is really what I'm guessing it was. He took full contact, full speed, took a couple bumps, and I'm guessing felt good the next morning, which is really important for an athlete. I mean, I've had a couple sports injuries. That first time that you go out there and you feel good again, it's the mental unlock is big. So, and that's, hey, McNeely, we don't know. We don't know how everything's going to go. And this is obviously a game. So we'll see how it all unfolds. Of course, I have a little hesitation betting against St. John's live at all. I think if you're betting against them, you're betting against them pregame, and then you're evaluating live and you're assuming that this insanely conditioned team will probably do well in the last 10 minutes. It's what they do. I mean, you can go look at every single win probability chart that this team has had. I cannot tell you. I was there Tuesday, chirping with other fans. We were down early to Marquette. It was not going well. We weren't hitting anything. And I'm just sitting there, feet back. I'm like, this is how it goes.
You're waiting for the run.
8 points in 13 minutes. Normal St. John's game. We'll win. No problem. And of course, it's what they do. It's what they do. They start off cold. They can't shoot. But like Shaka Smart said, there's 50 things you need to do to win a basketball game. Shooting is one of them. And St. John's does the other 49 things super, super well. So yeah, you're not going to hit the free throws. You're going to have Rick Pitino making insensitive, non-PC jokes about his feelings. But yeah, this team is so fundamentally sound in every single thing else. I mean, if they have a hot shooting run in March, Eli, and they have a 6-streak game where they shoot 37% from 3, they could be the champions. They could be the champions. That's all I'm saying. Like, if they go hot from 3, nothing can stop this team.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And one other thing in St. John's favor, and I didn't bet Marquette on Tuesday. I was a little hesitant with the line just because St. John's lost a couple tough ones to Marquette last year, so you knew they were out for revenge, on top of the fact that they're that much better this season. As you mentioned, they can close deficits in a flurry because of their defense and their ability to leak out in transition. Another key to this game, UConn 90th percentile in terms of offensive efficiency in transition on a points per possession basis per synergy. St. John's 90th percentile in transition defensive efficiency. So they're elite in guarding the opponent on the fast break. But going back to last year, St. John's dropped all 3 games to UConn. You could argue that Big East game, where St. John's tight game in the first half, flailed in the second half a bit. UConn covers, I think, around a 4.5 point line, something like that. That game may have been the difference, and probably was the difference with St. John's missing the tournament.
13-point home loss at the Garden. Can't happen. Can't happen. That was almost a year ago today. So that was the 3rd of February, 2024. And I mean, look.
Well, plus the March game in the Big East tournament.
That too. Right. They lost that. That was big as well.
Yeah.
But look, that UConn game, they were totally a different team. That was a stretch between February 18th of last year dating to January 13th. They only won 2 games. They lost 8 of 10 in between the months of mid-Jan to mid-Feb. They are just a monstrally different team. The reason why the line isn't like -7.5 is because there's a real chance they win, right? Like the probability of them winning is there. I think if you were to like condition this and say, assuming that UConn assuming UConn wins, what should the line be?
Right.
I would assume it's bigger. Like, I don't think, there's the way that the distributions work. The line is the middle ground, the median probability of where the game ends. And if the distribution isn't a full bell curve, and there's this little chunk over here where if St. John's does well, they end up in this part of the distribution. I think, that's where alternates start to come in, because I don't really like the 1 point result. I don't think that's really what's happening in this game. I could be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. It could be a 1 point game. But personally, I see value on it not being a tight game in either direction. This is a massive rivalry, finally renewed in 25 years. Someone is going to win pretty definitively. And I would imagine that in terms of how the Big East has looked this year, Eli, the numbers will stack up with that, because this is one of those conferences. I feel like every time I'm watching it, it feels like the team that wins like pretty handedly. So the Ken Palm stats, close game. Yeah, close game, 28%, which is high, but still, most games are going to be outside that 4 point range.
Let's move on to the Saturday college basketball card. We go from a great Big East matchup to a good Big Ten team against one that is dwindling fast. Number 24, Michigan, 17-5 overall, 9-2 in the Big Ten, projected to be a 4-point favorite per KenPom at Indiana. 14-9 are the Hoosiers, 5-7. They have lost 5-7 in Big Ten play, losing 6 of their last 7 games. Mike Woodson reportedly, as of Thursday, stepping down at the end of the season. But there are also some reports per the Indiana Hoosiers beat writers that he may step down before Saturday's game. So not just at the end of the season, but before the Michigan game with Dusty May, the favorite son of Indiana, and also returning to his alma mater, coming back to Assembly Hall, taking on potentially Mike Woodson's Indiana Hoosiers. So Mike Woodson on Tuesday night postgame, Justin, I don't know if you saw this quote.
No, I didn't.
Indiana, quote unquote, came out with good intentions despite, end quote, despite Wisconsin jumping out to a 26-6 lead on Tuesday night. That is a real quote. Indiana came out with good intentions. I don't know what kind of good intentions Mike Woodson thought or what he thinks good intentions are, but bettors certainly don't agree with him on that front. One thing with Michigan betting-wise, they have lost 6 straight games against the spread after covering 5 in a row, and turnovers have a lot to do with that. 336th in college basketball in offensive turnover rate. Danny Wolf, despite the fact that he is the first Big Ten player since Trace Jackson Davis and one of 4 over the last decade and a half, joining Draymond Green, Ethan Happ, and Trace Jackson Davis, the aforementioned TJD, to average 10 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 assists in a season since 2010. So do-it-all players. Danny Wolf is one of them, but he has a 27.3% turnover rate, and Michigan's turnover woes have cost them, at least in terms of covering the number, in their last 5 games. 24th most record luck also on shot quality, and drop coverage could be a big concern for me for Michigan in this one. They rank in the first percentile of mid-range attempt rate allowed, with Vlad Golden at the 5. He plays a ton of drop coverage. And you look at also the efficiency they've allowed in the mid-range, 13th highest, or 13th percentile, I should say, in mid-range efficiency allowed per CBB analytics. That is where Indiana thrives. And one quick note before I swing it to you, Justin, on the Hoosiers lineup concerns that have kind of turned around in a good way, even if Woodson is still on the sideline. Indiana's 3-man lineup of Miles Rice, Umar Ballo, and Malik Renew has a net rating of negative 38.9 across 57 Big Ten minutes with those 3 players on the floor together. That is a bottom negative 1% mark nationally, but second half against Wisconsin, despite the fact that Indiana lost by 12, failed to cover the closing number of 8.5. Again, losers of 6 of their last 7 games. Luke Goody played 30-plus minutes, I think around 35. Malik Renew barely played in the second half. I think you're going to see a starting lineup of Goody in, Renew out, so that spaces the floor more for Indiana. You still get those mid-range shots against Michigan's drop coverage. I like Indiana with or without Mike Woodson to cover this one and potentially pull off the home upset. Last dance with Mike Woodson on the sideline. Indiana going all out for its NCAA tournament hopes. What say you, Justin?
Yeah, Mike Woodson retiring is the right move. He doesn't understand college basketball. Just point blank. He has never had a team inside the top 320 teams in three-point attempt rate. Come on. I could tell a team to shoot more threes. I am telling you right now, Mike Woodson. I watched you as the coach of the Knicks. Not great. I've seen what you've done here at Indiana. Not great. You know what the key to basketball is? Taking the most valuable shot you can. You know what Mike Woodson and his teams do not do? Take valuable shots. I cannot bet on this team. All right. They just do not have the shot selection, and they definitely do not have the shot making. They are the second worst shot making team in the conference. Out of the timeout, there's only a few teams that do worse. That when they draw up a play out of the timeout, Eli, you can essentially expect less than a 45% make rate from two. That's about the value you get, which is, again, less than a 30% make rate from three when Mike Woodson's team draws up a out of the timeout three, less than 30%. That's just terrible. Sure, good in transition, but they don't get out in transition nearly enough for it to impact their game. The half-court offense is absolutely abysmal. Only a few teams in the conference do worse, and usually those teams can actually get buckets in some way. They see so much mid-range, but they are so bad at it. They are shooting 35% in the mid-range this season, in conference 36%, or expected to be. But that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. I'm not really sure where it turns up.
But don't you think that could work against Michigan's defense, even though the efficiency numbers haven't been great?
No, because again, the problem is that they don't have what it takes to force Michigan into the mistakes that they usually make. They don't force the turnovers on defense, and they don't force bad looks from three. So Danny Wolf turns the ball over when he can't get a good look. That's the problem, right? He forces it inside. He'll take a dribble drive when he's 7 foot, and obviously the amount of distance between the bottom of your palm and the floor is correlated to your turnover percent, so it's hard for a big man to dribble, and he can do it. He's good. He's one of the only 7-foot guys I'd trust to put the ball on the floor in college, but it still is detrimental to the team. But Indiana, they can't really, they're not going to cause many problems. I'd lean Michigan, but I'm not touching this. I don't want to touch it. Big Ten basketball is hard enough to bet already. I'm still sore from not cashing Maryland plus 2.5 last night, Eli. What? So no,
Our terms.
No, thank you.
Terms.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, blowing a 17-point lead against Ohio State. You had to throw it in.
I mean, I had OSU live plus 5.5, but come on, I should have had both. I should have. That's all. I'm good.
I will say one last thing about Big Ten and Maryland specifically. 6 losses, all 6 by 2 possessions or less. You could blame that on Kevin Willard. You could shake your head, Justin. I get it. I think that benefits them long-term. Close game luck has not been on their side. They could be even better than their 17-6 record. So worth noting that Maryland has a higher upside than the record may show because all their losses have been tight. But I think this is a get-up game for Indiana, again, with or without Woodson. Give me the last dance. Give me the Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen vibes at Assembly Hall. I think Indiana wins this game outright, but I'll be taking the points. Probably some home tax involved in a must-win spot. Probably going to be a line of Michigan -3, maybe -2.5. I'll take Indiana.
And look, let's not pretend that media disparagement and public reputation don't make a difference. Mick Cronin got out there and started yelling, and I came on this very show with you, Eli, and I said, there's a very good likelihood that UCLA responds because the coaching staff and the players that Mick Cronin brought in care for him, care for his methods, accept his methods, know how he works. The same thing when, Coach Pitino is doing it. Those guys, they understand. Guy. Right. It's the guy who recruited them. It's the guy you play for. It's your coach.
Yeah.
So I don't know. With all this talk, could Indiana get up and really say we got to win this? I mean, Indiana's chosen son, Dusty May, is here, and if we don't, like, coach is gone. He's the one who brought us in. This is because we're playing badly. Yeah, he's not coaching great, but come on. Yeah, I could see it. I could see it being a big statement game for Indiana, just on the precipice of defend this house.
Yeah, I really like this bet. This was my circled spot for the Saturday card. So, again, it's hard to say back Indiana here, but I will be on the Hoosiers at home, even as a 2.5-point dog. I really like Indiana in this spot.
So I think if you're gonna take a spot on Indiana, it's this one. But at the other end, it could be the spot where Danny Wolf looks like an NBA player. Good luck.
Yeah, he did on Wednesday, for that matter, against Oregon with that step back three.
Hey, Oregon covered. So I don't really care. Like, he might have looked great, but at the end of the day,
you're right.
Good teams win, great teams cover.
Yeah, Indiana could lose this one as long as they keep it closer within a one-possession game. I'll be happy.
That'll be a busy game. Like, look, they might not be super high on them, but basketball for that school, Indiana basketball is a big deal. The Michigan rivalry, they could be 0-12, and they would pack that place and be out, day drinking, tailgating before that game. Indiana gets loud. It's gonna be a good game regardless.
Yeah, they're either gonna be loud, cheering the Hoosiers, or booing Mike Woodson late in the first half. We'll see how this one goes. But Justin, 2 of 3 Big Ten or SEC games, I should say, that we're going to dive into here on the show. Number 22, Mississippi State, losers of 2 games in a row at Georgia. Georgia bouncing back from a blowout loss against Alabama last Saturday with a win against LSU at home. The Tigers have been struggling big time in SEC play. Mississippi State, again, losing at Missouri, or at home against Missouri, I should say, last Saturday, and then against Alabama in tight fashion with a missed layup. I was on the Bulldogs in that one. You were on the Crimson Tide. So shout out to you for picking Alabama last week. But what say you for Mississippi State at Georgia on Saturday?
Bulldogs, for sure. Back-to-back losses. Yeah, Alabama's one thing, but Missouri was an expected win, Eli. This is a team that does well, and not just an expected win, nearly an expected cover, and they got trounced. So yeah, their defense is expected to be much better than that, and their 3-point shooting is struggling in the conference too. So this is about as good of a buy low spot as you're going to get on them. We have them as a top 10 defense, top 20 team. And, Georgia is definitely a bottom of the conference team. It's a really strong conference, but someone's got to be at the bottom. So that would be Georgia. And this is a big win. This is a big, I hate to use the must win thing, but it's not even must win. It's going to win. They are better. And this is probably a spot against Georgia, against a team that has done really well with shot selection. But guess what? Everyone's hitting everything against them. They're not hitting anything against anyone. And they're getting absolutely lucky on defense, which has turned into a few unexpected wins. So they lost Alabama, they were expected to win. They beat South Carolina, expected to lose, and they beat Oklahoma, expected to lose. So a little bit lucky, expected to be 14-9, not 16-7. So decent differential, high turnover rate on defense or on offense. Sorry. Give me the dogs. The Bulldogs, not the Bulldogs. Oh boy.
Right. Some Bulldogs are going to win this game.
There you go. 100% guarantee rate. Bulldogs are going to cover.
I'm with you there. So Mississippi State, 11th in turnover percentage in SEC play among SEC teams. Georgia, 13th. So both teams turn the ball over a lot. Georgia's transition defense has been pretty good, I will say, but this one to me is going to boil down to, can Mississippi State get those live ball turnovers and leak out? Because 3-point percentage-wise, Mississippi State 14th in conference play, Georgia 16th. As you said, shot making, not really a thing for the Bulldogs this season. One of their best shooters, Blue Kane, has really struggled. He's gotten it going a little bit, but he's regressed in a negative sense from deep this year. I do agree with you. This is a good buy low spot on Mississippi State. I'm hoping the market bets this one down to maybe Georgia -1. So in Mississippi State's, or I should say to Mississippi State -1. So maybe the market comes in on the home team in the Bulldogs in this spot. But I'll be looking to back the road Bulldogs with you, Justin, here. I think Josh Hubbard is able to bounce back in a big way. If you look over his last, just in his last game, because he had a huge. Yeah, right. He had a huge game against Alabama. Had a good, efficiency-wise, he was very good against Missouri. 36 minutes, 24 points, 6 threes. Does that continue if you go back to the overtime win against South Carolina? 2 of 6 from 2, 2 of 9 from 3. The game before that against Tennessee on the road, 4 of 12 from 3. So good last couple games from deep, struggling in the 2 games before that. Really, the 3 games before that, because the overtime win against Mississippi Ole Miss, 1 of 9 from 2, 1 of 4 from 3. I guess he continues this pretty efficient stretch over the last 2 against Missouri and Alabama. I agree with you. Bounce back spot for Mississippi State, and hopefully the market comes in on Georgia, because I'll be looking to back the road dogs in this spot.
Bounce back, buy low. I feel like bounce back, people say bounce back a lot and they mean buy low. I do that a lot. That's what it is. A bounce back insinuates that you're betting on them because they lost. And while that is somewhat like in the same Venn diagram as buying low, because you usually don't buy low on teams unless they lose, I think buying low is a little bit more granular and usually has to do with like sustained performance. Well, a lot of times you hear people saying, bounce back spot because they just lost. Like, no, it's because they lost and they were expected to win. They've been playing better than they look. So, sure, will they likely bounce back? Is that what I'm betting on? Yes, but it's not because I think they're bouncing back. It's because I think you're getting a good price. That's how every bet's made, right? It doesn't really matter the bounce. It matters the price.
Right. A team could lose 2 games in a row and maybe they're still overvalued in the betting market. For instance, I don't think UConn had that bad of a stretch in terms of losses in a row. Yeah, they were inconsistent. They lose at Villanova, beat Georgetown, lose at Creighton, or at home against Creighton, beat Butler in overtime, didn't cover the spread in that game. I don't think they covered the spread, they only covered the spread in 1 of 4 games over that span. So the market was still low on them, yet Xavier closes as a short favorite at home, and you could argue, is UConn going to bounce back after failing to cover in 3 of 4 games? Not a great stretch for them, and they still fail to cover the market's expectations at Xavier. So just an example, and we hit on that game. We were on the Musketeers a couple weeks ago. Just an example of maybe not a team on a losing streak, but a team that's struggling to cover the number, covering the market's expectations, yet they continue to do so even when the market is lower on them. Sometimes the barrel isn't low enough for a team as good as UConn, according to the market, maybe still going to struggle just because of an injury to a guy as important as Liam McNeely is to the UConn Huskies, as we touched on earlier in the show. But let's continue on here, Justin. Over to the Big 12, looking at BYU losing to Arizona. They were a team that got bet up, according to the market, earlier in the week. I think you were on them on the last Beat the Closing Number episode. And Arizona went into BYU, won that one by 11 points. Pretty shocking win for me when you look at the numbers for the Arizona Wildcats. Caleb Love continued to shoot well from 3, which was a little bit of unexpected, according to us on Tuesday or on Monday's show.
He got me a little.
He got both of us. BYU blitzed Cincinnati by 28 points in their last meeting. And now this one, you could argue a must-win game for both teams, maybe a little bit more of a must-win for Cincinnati's NCAA tournament resume, but BYU also theoretically on the bubble here. So, big one in Ohio. What say you?
This is pretty interesting. I'm such a BYU fan. They are shot quality darlings. It's very rare to find a team in the top 20 of shot quality that is expected to be is essentially being rated as unlucky. They're 15-7. Shot quality expects them 17-5 this season. And that's not like two specific instances. It's 2 net wins on expectancy, which means it's usually, a net of around 3 wins in conference, expected to beat Arizona, expected to beat Utah, expected to beat Texas Tech. Expected to lose to UCF on the road by 1, but again, that was just a really tight game. That's like within an error. You could arguably drop that and call it a tie. And then expected to beat Providence on a terrible shooting performance in one of their most Eastern games. So they're an interesting team. BYU does what you want to see. They're really good at rebounding. They attack the rim really effectively. They run in transition. They develop spacing, and they don't let you get to the rim on defense. So you combine that with a good assist rate and a high frequency of threes. Yeah, they have three like losses that I really am, I guess, concerned with. The Arizona one, again, unexpected, but lost to TCU for real, lost to Houston for real, which are both very good teams, and the TCU loss was expected to be close. So I'm pretty big on this BYU team. I think they are still being slept on. The Big 12 is still, one of the top 3 conferences in the nation. Maybe it's that they get a lot of benefit from playing in the altitude, but this should still be a spot where you want to trust BYU. I've been out on Cincinnati, and honestly, Cincinnati's kind of proven me a little wrong recently, right? Like they rattled off that big win against UCF. I lost that game. They were expected to beat West Virginia, expected to beat Utah. So 3 games where shot quality expected 3 wins, but only got 1. Yeah, I'm likely staying away or taking BYU. If anything, I got to see what the number comes out at. It's a tough one. It's definitely buy low on both.
Yeah, and you look at Cincinnati's shooting numbers, it's bad. It is a poor man's version of St. John's.
26% from deep in conference play.
Right, yeah. And 31.7%, 278th in the country overall this season. This is going to be one of those spots, though, as we always touch on, like Indiana to an extent, even though they're going to be a home dog against Michigan regardless of the number. Cincinnati's probably going to close as a favorite here. I would say maybe even as high as 2.5. So I would say, Justin, tell me if you're in agreement here, wait on maybe the close to tip line rather than bet it on open or overnight, because maybe you get a good number here in a quote-unquote revenge spot on the Cougars.
Yeah, again, that's an interesting spot to consider. And again, it's hard. Like I don't normally only do that if I like a side. Like I would probably recommend trying to do both, right? Or split your play up. You're like, okay, well, I think there might be a spot to get in. But then you're going to be kicking yourself if BYU comes out and runs them off the floor wire to wire and you never got your chance. That's a good point. So if you really like them, I do think you got to bet a team pregame if you have that edge. But then you can also say, hey, look, I have an edge. I expect them to do well. I also understand that basketball is a game of runs. It goes up and down. Teams score 3 possessions in a row without an answer. Happens every single game. I'm going to wait for that moment and try to get an even better line. And then look, if it doesn't come and you get a rocking chair win and you just got your hands back behind your head and you're watching the game, you're like, oh, great call, me. That's fine, right? You're going to feel good about that. But I do think, I don't know, but for most bettors, for most people who probably approach things bet to bet and live and die with a result, and maybe not, that's dramatic, not live and die. But like, they feel attached to their bets. Not a lot of people are like me, I guess, Eli, who is so worn down because and in a good way. I've placed.
Yeah, you are volume.
Right, I've placed 50 bets in the last 48 hours. It's just the truth, right? And I will place another 50 bets in the next 48 hours. It's just how I am. But I think that gives me such a benefit of like eroding my sensitivity away. Like you shouldn't feel one bet because you're not here betting 10 times and never betting again. The idea is that you're doing this for the long term, and if you get a bad result or something doesn't go your way, it's not in your benefit to question your entire process, because I would, in my experience, I think like 30 to 35% of college basketball games just don't even exist within reality. That's how much variability there is in this game, right? Like, just doesn't go anywhere near close to expectation, and no one gets it right. And how do you know that happens? Because Vegas is 15 points off the line, the sharps are on the other side. Sometimes stuff like that just happens. People are just wrong. It's sports. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's like when someone trips me for like, oh, I played a team -1 and they lost by 20. Everyone thought they were supposed to be -1. I was wrong. Market was wrong. Everyone was wrong. Move on. Just craziness. There's no point sitting there and harping on that, or worse, using those results to predict future performance. So I digress. Yep. I'm half sick and I'm a little annoyed today. So.
And you could hear that cough in my throat. We are both sick on the show, but we are powering through on Beat the Closing Number. Come on now. All right. Last game we're going to touch on, Justin. Yeah. Big Ten after dark. Big Ten after dark on the West Coast here. Northwestern at Washington. And I just want to, as a caveat, Justin and I both have had a winning season. For me, I just want to tally up my latest. I am 27-18-1 on the season betting college hoops. Justin, do you have a total for you this year?
No.
But really good. Still, you, and I'm not just saying.
I mean, I know I don't have like the record. I know I'm up 15 units on live betting on the show, and I'm up about another 35 units personally. Yeah. So it's been a really good season. I bet half units on standard plays. So right. ROI has been incredible. We had a 25, 30 unit week run in December, a little cold, dropped about 15, 20 units in the first 2 weeks of January, and then have absolutely gone nuclear again, back up another 20, 30 units in the last 2-3 weeks. So welcome to college ball. Like you're gonna go up and down. You're gonna question if you're good at it for a week sometimes, and then you're gonna go absolute light speed, and you're gonna get everything right for a week. I had a 14-5 day, and I missed my 4th out of 4 big plays that day by the hook. So everything's been feeling great. The reads have been feeling good all year. Every time I lose, I'm like, I get it. I understand why I lose. I usually do not say I shouldn't have made that bet. I think the best bettors will look you in the eye after a loss and tell you, I'd take it again. And if you can't do that, I don't think you should be betting your plays.
I agree. No, that's a great take for experienced, middle tier, novice bettors out there. I lost Providence, for instance, on Wednesday night as a 3.5 point dog. I would have bet that 20 times out of 20. 100 times out of 100, 1,000 times out of 1,000.
You understand. It's like having a weighted coin in your pocket and not getting the result you bet on. Like, okay, right. I just know it's weighted, so I'm going to keep playing. And, I mean, we've seen it a lot in the gambling diaspora world out here. All this stuff going on, the chatter, the Twitter spaces, everyone's talking about who deserves this and all that and who picks and that. Look, here's the simplest barometer I got for you. This is all math. This is all math. If you don't understand the number game and you don't understand the probability game that you're playing, and you can't say, hey, I think this play wins at 60% and I'm getting billed 54%, which means that 6% edge means I should play it every single time regardless of what actually happens. Yeah, my guess is that you're just having a terrible time doing this. So that's the best advice I could give. Last 5 minutes, best advice I've probably ever given in this space.
Yeah, no, I love it. All right, let's move on to, again, Big Ten after dark. Northwestern projected to be a 2-point road favorite at lowly Washington. The Northwestern Wildcats 13-10 overall, 4-8 in Big Ten play, and the Huskies 11-11, 2-9 in conference. Wildcats not only without Brooks Barnhizer, second leading scorer, out for the rest of the season with a foot injury, but Jalen Leach, their starting point guard, reportedly out for the rest of the year with a knee injury as well. This is Northwestern's first West Coast trip of the season. So big key for me, Washington's ability to limit Northwestern on the offensive glass. Wildcats' 4th best offensive rebounding rate in conference play. Osabor and the Huskies front line, pretty good on the defensive boards. And then with Osabor offensively, one of the true do-it-all players in college basketball, even if he wasn't on a crappy Washington team. Martinelli, Northwestern's best player at this point without Barnhizer is an average defender in general, especially in isolation. And Osabor's specialty is truly his ability to handle the basketball as a 6'8" forward. So I think Washington's able to get out in transition and take advantage of Northwestern and also limit their second chance shots. Whether Washington closes as a short favorite, maybe -1 with the Leach news, or short home dog, I'll be on the Huskies here. Again, don't chase, but this is truly a late night spot here with Washington.
Yeah. Well, this is quite the matchup. Washington kind of feels a little bit like an enigma. Their defense is really nice. They limit you in terms of the spacing you develop, the shots you take. The rim and three rate is low. And again, that's in a conference where teams understand shot math. So this is tough. I mean, coming off of the Nebraska loss, which was the biggest underperformance for Washington's defense in almost 2 months since the USC game where they gave up 85 on 65 expected. They were only expected to allow 75 points to Nebraska. But Nebraska shot 11 of 19 from deep, right? And that was after Washington started that game 7 for 7 from deep. That was like the live betting masterclass if you picked up Nebraska early.
Yeah. Or Washington first half, and then to your point, right. Nebraska second half.
Right. Washington went ice cold. They shot under 0.9 points per possession in the second half after shooting red hot. I definitely have concerns that this is just not a Power 5 offense, if that's fair. They definitely are a defense that I think is going to continue to cause some problems. But worst offense in the conference. Defense hasn't been great, but you also have to remember the strength of schedule in the conference has been tough for sure. I mean, you're coming off of a run of Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, Oregon, UCLA, win against Minnesota, and then Nebraska. So this is This is going to be the easiest team that they face besides the win at Minnesota in over a month, and they're at home. So yeah, with the injury, I was actually coming in when we first started talking top of the show before we started recording. Eli, you were like, well, I know you said you leave Northwestern and some injury, and I was like, well, that's probably a good call out because guess what? Shot quality does not factor out the injury in terms of any way, shape, or form, right? So if a player has been playing for 20 games and he's going to miss game 21, the shot quality data is based on those 20 games, and you can't really filter them out. You have to use your own know-how. What starts to happen, though, is after 2 or 3 games or even 40 minutes of him playing or them playing without that player, shot quality is going to be more accurate to knowing how they're looking now than what the efficiency metrics are going to do because they're not going to be able to separate it out as fast when it starts to happen. So it's a little bit of a twofer. Of course, look, KenPom doesn't have injury adjustments either necessarily. The market makes them. The books make them.
Torvik, I think, is a little injury adjusted, but yeah, you're right about KenPom.
Yeah, of course, it is a little, but usually what happens is it's predicated based off of games without that player, or sportsbooks make adjustments, or they open bad lines and with low limits, and they accept sharp bettors who know the injuries better than them, and they move them before the limits go up, and they still make money because they accepted $150 bets at the low limit to figure it out, and then $400, $500 bets at the high limit, and they win. So it's an exciting, a way to attack it, I think, in terms of using that data, but I would definitely lean a bit here towards that side with Washington. Injuries, a big part of college basketball and nearly impossible to quantify unless you truly know a team top to bottom.
All right, so that's going to wrap it here for this portion of the podcast, handicapping Saturday and Friday college basketball. Thank you so much to Justin Perri for joining us, a part of Shot Quality. Justin, anything you want to plug here before we wrap up this section of the podcast?
Yeah, sure. Huge week over at SQ. We just announced an expansion into our second sport, logo change, the whole 9 yards. So crazy week for me, trying to juggle a million things at once. Of course, also have a weekend futures preview coming out on hoopshq.com from Seth Davis, which is the newest thing I've been working on. I mean, 1,000,001 irons in the fire. March is a month away. We are so close. I'll be out in Vegas for the first round, hopefully at Seton for the East Regionals. This is the best time in college basketball, Eli. Thank you so much for having me on, and I will see you next week.
Now we're joined by the great Rocco Miller. You can follow him on X at Rocco Miller 8, college hoops bracketologist at thebracketeer.org, and for the field of 68. How are we doing, Rocco? It's been a while. I think the last time we had you on, and we'll be having you back on for this, I'm already marking you down whether you like it or not, is our mid-major edition of handicapping conference tournaments. But again, first and foremost, how are we doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great, Eli. Good to see you again and talk about some real nitty gritty details. It's a Friday morning when we're recording this, so I'm right in the middle of my process that starts Thursday night, spills into Friday for today's forecast. And our show is every Monday and Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern on Field of 68, which is called Fielding the 68. And I don't think I'm on today. I have to double check that. But the bottom line is, our updates Monday and Friday are mainly because teams play usually once midweek and once on the weekend. So it's a perfect opportunity to take a snapshot in time after everybody gets to take the court again. And it's amazing to see how. Not only how fast this season's going by, it happens every year, but also just all the consolidated power at the top has been, somewhat of a watered down, shot to the heart for a mid-major person like me, but it is what it is, and we're doing the best we can.
Hey, San Francisco, after their win over St. Mary's, is quote-unquote on the bubble, according to you. You'll have an updated last 8 teams on the bubble, but outside looking in, updated later this afternoon on Bracketeer.org. So be sure to check that out. The place to go when it comes to trying to decipher who's on the bubble, who's in, and who's out. Last 4 in, last 4 out, and maybe the next 4 out. So be sure to check that out on Rocco's terrific Bracketology website. But let's get into FanDuel odds. These are NCAA tournament odds to make the tournament. Nebraska minus 168 to make it. According to these odds, the best of the bunch. Nebraska, again, minus 165 to get into the dance, plus 126 to be on the outside looking in after winning 3 straight. Big time wins at Oregon, against Illinois at home before that, and then at Washington coming back in the second half. Vanderbilt has a big one this weekend against Texas at home, minus 160 to break into the dance. SMU plus 130. Arkansas plus 180. They host Alabama on Saturday night in Fayetteville. North Carolina hosting Pitt. UNC plus 195 to get into the dance. Pitt plus 470 after losing in blowout fashion against Virginia. So I'll let you take the lead here, Rocco, on which team you want to start with. Which one of the bunch, and I know you can't necessarily bet on it because you're going on all these major networks. You can't put your money where your mouth is, in a sense. But which odds do you like the best, whether it's plus money or minus money, to get into the dance?
Yeah, well, I think we could address each team individually if that works for you, Eli, because sure. I think one thing to tell the audience here is that teams are selected to the tournament, not conferences, not any set criteria of where you're from and anything along those lines. I think the reality is you compare these teams, you stack teams, and there's certain things you got to do to get in. And for our SEC teams like Arkansas and Vanderbilt, you mentioned, and we have a Big Ten team in there in Nebraska. I think they're going to be treated a little bit differently based on the amount of just the sheer quantity of quality games they play. They're playing a surplus of quad 1 and 2 games, and that's an easy way for the committee to sort your results. So it's just so top heavy. Of course, they're going to sprinkle in some big wins, and you at a certain point you got to win enough games. You can't be. I call them meaningful games. So if anybody's seen my work before, it's the easiest way to kind of summarize. You get rid of quad 4 and you look at the rest of the picture. And if you're in those top 2 leagues, and you can throw the Big 12 in that mix too, you're pretty much going to have all your results in quad 1 or 2, maybe a couple in quad 3. And you can kind of qualify all of those as quote unquote meaningful wins. So if you're below 500, you better have something extra special Otherwise, you're not getting in. You're going to whatever the tournament's called on Fox or the NIT. So with Nebraska, I'll start with Nebraska. I think they're in the best shape today. In that meaningful category, they're currently 9-8. They have a 500 road neutral record, which is another key metric for getting in, 6-6. And as you said, they have road wins at Oregon, Creighton, and Washington. 2 of those 3 being NCAA projected teams pretty clearly. And, Washington still matters because they're in the top 2 quadrants. Most of the bubble do not have 3 road wins at this current stage against that category, and 2 of their 3 are against the field. So I like Nebraska quite a bit. Now, again, they're going to have to get to the finish line at 500 or better. And if you just go, what I did just to kind of make the exercise reasonable is go off the cumulative KenPom projection, because if you go game by game, you're not going to get the right result. You got to do the cumulative. And with the cumulative, he's got them getting to a final record in this category of 13-12. So I feel very good about Nebraska's chances. 5 of their remaining 8 are at home. Maryland, Michigan, and Ohio State now, barely in Ohio State. They're teeter-tottering. But those 3 would all be tournament-level home wins. Nebraska's a great home team traditionally. Plus, you have Iowa and Minnesota. Can't slip up in those 2. And then on the road, they also get Ohio State there. So 2 games against Ohio State. And then they have Penn State, Northwestern. Not must-wins at this point, but certainly need to strike a balance. And out of those 8 games, just go 500 the rest of the way. So overall, Nebraska projects as in. Now, with Vanderbilt, I'm going to move over to the SEC. They have their whole different set of problems. Out of any bubble team, they easily have the worst non-conference strength of schedule. And time again, traditionally, if you're over 300 in the non-conference strength of schedule measurement, and you're from a power conference, you're not going to be one of those last 4 teams in. You need to be safely inside the cut line, and that makes Vanderbilt very unique compared to anybody else because they're 329th in non-conference strength of schedule. And on top of that, their 2 key wins thus far, Tennessee and Kentucky, were both at home. In order to get selected off the bubble, you typically need to have that big, juicy road win, especially from a power league. Right now, their best road win's LSU, and they're just 1-4 in their 5 chances for quad 1 and 2 road wins. So Vandy's got a lot of work to do. And if you project out, and they're actually, the one thing that Vandy's got going for them in that meaningful area, because they played pretty well in their MTE and had some other good non-conference, they're actually 8-6. So they actually checked the box there. But the problem is they haven't done the road damage yet. And, of course, the strength of schedule component. Then you look at the rest of their schedule. They got to go to Kentucky and Tennessee and Texas A&M and Georgia all on the road. So they're going to need to win 1 or 2 of those at least. And then at home, they have a heavyweight opportunity with Auburn coming to town later this year. They also have Ole Miss, Missouri, and Texas and Arkansas. Their last 9 games are absolutely ridiculous. And so you want to take the cumulative. They've been a good home team, of course. They're going to finish 11-12 according to KenPom, which means they're only going to win 3 more times. I'd say Vanderbilt very much trending towards an out. I think based on what you sent me, Eli, before, they were getting plus on that. I would say that's probably
that's interesting. If you look at Vanderbilt's odds to miss the tournament, plus 120, and this is before the Texas game here on Saturday.
Yep. Now, again, I like Vanderbilt. I love watching them play. They're a great story. They have veteran players. They could go get somebody on the road. I think they might need 2 of those road wins out of the 4, which, again, I'll give you the list. Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, very doable there, and Texas A&M, who's feisty always. Going to be hard to get 2 of those 4. And then continue winning against that high-level competition at home. I just feel like there's too many things working against Vanderbilt based on what we know now and what's ahead. So take it however you want to. And then with Arkansas, obviously hot of late, picked up 2 amazing road wins against, of course, Kentucky and Texas.
And John L. Davis is healthy.
And he's healthy. And I don't know what Boogie Flan's future status is, but reintegrating them together could be dicey, could be not dicey. We don't know. But as a bracketology, point of view, they're still behind the 8 ball on that meaningful wins thing. They're 7-8. And the only team I put into the field today with a sub 500 was Ohio State. Well, I know they're not on our list here, but I put Ohio State in at 8-9 in this area because they're the only team to win at Mackey. That's what I'm talking about. If you're going to get selected as a team below 500 in this area, you got to have something extra special, and Ohio State has that. Plus, they can throw in their Texas and Kentucky wins themselves, and they beat Maryland at home yesterday. So they've got 4, top half of the bracket type of wins. Whereas Arkansas, Kentucky's starting to slip. They might fall, like I'm still reorganizing the seeds. They might fall to a 5 seed today. Texas is a bubble team. Michigan is solid. Beat them on a neutral court in the MSG Jimmy V Classic. But Michigan's probably around a 5 or a 6 themselves. They don't have that super heavy win. If Arkansas can get that later this year, and I know they go to Auburn, there's your chance. Good luck. They go to Texas A&M as well, and I think that might qualify. Texas A&M's coming in as a 2 seed. So, but outside of that, Arkansas is going to have to play this teeter-totter game of getting above 500, and their schedule's pretty hard, as I started to hint at. And right now, they still project under KenPom cumulative, having fun with that word, as an 11-14 finish line. And so that means they need 2 extra surprising results and hold serve in all the games they're projected to win. So Arkansas is still very much projecting as a team out, and I do have them out today as well.
So do you want
to add any thoughts there? Yeah,
right. Just a note there with Arkansas minus 245 to miss the tournament. Now, how much the odds would change if they beat Alabama at home on Saturday? But let's say they beat the Tide. Are they?
They're in on Monday. They're in on Monday, but again, the remaining schedule probably would still have them go down to 12-13. Now, Alabama would be their best overall win, but it's a home win, so it's not, it's like a piece of silver versus a piece of gold. If they won at Alabama, that would be a piece of gold. If they won at Auburn, that's like the heaviest piece of gold in the world right now. So it would be debatable if Arkansas could get to the finish line without that heavy road win, and if they finish 12-13 in these meaningful games. And that right now, like I said, they're projected 11-14. So you have to look at both. The snapshot in time will be on Arkansas' side by Monday, but the future still spells a little bit of doom.
No, those are great points. And again, Arkansas projected to be a 4-point dog at home against Alabama. They've beaten the market's expectations in 2 games in a row. I guess it depends how many more times John Calipari is going to get revenge, maybe in the SEC tournament against Kentucky, and then that would be another marquee win for Arkansas. But Rocco, I want to shift over to ceiling floor teams, and we have these listed on the screen for viewers that are paying attention on YouTube. Remember to give the video a thumbs up and ring the bell if you like what you're watching here on Beat the Closing Number College Basketball Edition, as always, with the great Rocco Miller talking bracketology. Missouri, projected 5 seed in your latest bracket that I could see. We'll see what kind of bracket we see on Friday afternoon and where they're projected after a tight win, another cover. I think they're 9-1 ATS in their last 10 games. Oregon, projected 5 seed in your Tuesday edition of Bracketology, but losing another game at Michigan. Close covering, but still a loss, according to, and meaningful to the Bracketology numbers. And then Maryland, yes, they lost at Ohio State, blew a 17-point lead, but I'm most curious your perception about Maryland down the stretch, especially when you look at projections per KenPom, because they're projected to be favored in their next 6 games. I bet a Maryland Final Four future a few weeks ago at 23-1. They're 16-1 right now. I think that's the best price of any long shot you can get in the market. I think this is Kevin Willard's best team, even going back to the Seton Hall tenure with Miles Powell. And if you compare resumes, efficiency, numbers-wise on Torvik, one of their comparisons, which I don't think is that far-fetched, is Oklahoma, 2016 Final Four team that got blitzed in the final weekend of the college basketball season, losing to the eventual national champion Villanova Wildcats. Maryland doesn't have a Buddy Hield, but they have shooters around arguably the best dual big lineup in Derek Queen and Julian Reese. You have one of the best dual threat point guards, two-way point guards in college basketball in Jacoby Gillespie, top 10 assist rate, top 10 steal rate in Big Ten play. And I touched on this with Justin earlier in the show. 301st in KenPom's luck ranking because all 6 of their losses have come by 2 possessions or less. So I think this team has a ton of upside, even if you want to knock on Kevin Willard. What kind of ceiling, if they hit their ceiling down the stretch in Big Ten play per the Big Ten projections, do you give Maryland for maybe a top 5 seed, top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament? What say you?
Yeah, from a ceiling perspective, so I think today they'll land either a 6 or a 7, and that's because their resume is not very strong. They have the road Illinois game, which is massive. They won that game by 20, I think, but they've had some shaky results throughout. Of course, the Washington loss and others, and and they have a 2-5 record on the road in their best 7 road games in the top 2 quadrants. So that's hurting their resume. But I agree with you in terms of ceiling. Obviously, extremely talented. There's some pros on this team. There's no doubt. And that's always going to give you a chance to advance once you get to the NCAA tournament, regardless of your opposition. But I think the ceiling is a little bit limited just based on the remaining schedule. I mean, they have 5 home games out of 8 left. And home games, like we've talked about on other teams, don't move your needle too much. And Michigan State out of those 5 is the only, it's a good one, but it's the only of those 5 that are NCAA level teams. The other 4 are middle of the pack to bottom end Big Ten teams. And then there are 3 road games left. Their only big one is at Michigan. And then the other 2 are non-tournament teams at this moment. So they have 2 games out of 8 that can really move the needle. Unless, the other end of seeding in recent years has been just your overall performance numbers, whether it's now Torvik is on the team sheet. You have, of course, KenPom still there. And then you have, you could look at the net itself as a performance measurement. And they're strong there. They're top 18 right now in that area when you average all those together. And I think the committee is using that more and more for seeding. Now, I think they do need to get back closer to 500 or at least 500 on the road to get into the top 4 seeds, because those are what the committee calls protected seeds. It means you can't play a team from the local area within 75 miles in your first game. So it's a really important distinction. And it's also what they preview starting next weekend. There's one time, and it's next weekend after the Super Bowl. It's always the Saturday after the Super Bowl. Right. It'll be on CBS. The show is the top 16. So there's a whole different set of criteria to get into that 16. But once you start those 5 seeds through 10 seeds, I think a lot of it is performance driven. So Maryland has a really good chance, as long as they finish strong, to get to that 5. But to get into the 4 and the 3 seed area, they're really going to they probably need to win at Michigan.
Right. So, I don't think it's crazy to say what they have. I'm doing quick math here. They have 9 games remaining. The talent level to me, and Rocco, call me crazy, I think they're the best team in the Big Ten. Purdue gets that Mackey home court. We could argue off the air on that one way or the other, but I genuinely think this team has the highest ceiling, at least, among Big Ten teams because of their pro talent level and the shooting that surrounds Queen and Reese. I think that's a fair statement. They could end the regular season winning 8 of 9 games. Maybe you lose the Michigan one on the road.
I think they're supposed to win 6. So and then the Michigan's on the road. Michigan State's at home. They're probably supposed to win 7. They're probably supposed to win that one at home. So, and I agree with you. Like from an upside pro potential, them and Illinois are freakishly that good to where they're Final Four contenders if things click during the right time of the year, which is March. And then Wisconsin to maybe a watered down degree, but they've had some awesome performances. They just haven't done much away from home. Hard to trust that until they do. And then you have just UCLA, who, with Mick Cronin's and their physicality, they're kind of a great wild card. We all know about Purdue and Michigan State and Michigan's Twin Towers. So the Big Ten is just really interesting because it's hard to separate those 7. But I would say with the talent and the upside, it's Maryland and Illinois are the 2 to look at.
That's a fair point. The reason why I also like the dual big lineup for Maryland in terms of getting exposed in the tournament. As good as Mara has been for UCLA, drop coverage, it's not like he's going to be able to guard 1 through 5. He can't guard 1 through 5 at his size and lack of quickness.
Lateral mobility, let's just say.
Right, to say the least. But Queen can guard 1 through 5. Reese can guard 1 through 5. Mm-hmm. They're both physical bigs. And the dual threat tandem, like, we don't get that with true bigs in college basketball anymore. And they're playing like Jeff Withey, Thomas Robinson-esque composure in the front court, and just in terms of efficiency and spacing, because you don't see that in college basketball anymore. Two true bigs playing this well together in a modern day era of college hoops. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's the trend everybody's trying to get to. You see what's going on at Michigan. You see it in other examples. I'm trying to think. There's a really good mid-major example.
But Michigan has, like, Wolf could space the floor. Queen and Reese are floor spacers.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, they're basically hanging low in the paint and just dominating the paint. But yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating approach to the strategy, and obviously they're leveraging their talent the best way they can. And but my biggest thing is, so my thing on the KenPom luck thing has always been, and kind of proves out every year, is I would, in a lot of cases, change the word luck to clutch. It just shows they're not very clutch down the stretch. Like, you can't. There's different things you got to do to win close games, and if you're constantly
but it's also
losing,
variance.
There is.
Yeah.
I don't want to take the variance part away, because I certainly back you up on that. But it's more, there are just certain, and I'm not saying Maryland specifically, but there are just certain teams that don't have that, like, clutch factor, or maybe it's just like you don't have a closer that you can go to, so you're settling for like a late jumper and going to overtime instead of having a guy who could you want the ball in his hands and he'll go make a basket, a reasonable high percentage shot, things like that, where could be the difference between winning 4 more games and losing 4 more games.
Absolutely. And last thing on Maryland that I know you'll agree on, last time you were on the show talking mid-major hoops, previewing conference tournaments, Missouri Valley Conference last year, Gillespie and Dia both on Belmont. We like them as a potential long shot. They nearly took down UNI in the quarterfinals. Gillespie is a closer in March. I know he struggled a bit at Ohio State, had a poor performance at Washington, but I love that kid, man, and his ability to
so good.
His prowess at both ends of the floor. He's so composed, and his ability to break down defenses late in the shot clock, find Miguel, find Rodney Rice. I can't wait to watch him in the tournament. A stud point guard, and so underrated, despite the fact that, again, his percentages, steal rate and assist rate in Big Ten play are very, very sound for a mid-major transfer in his first year in the Big Ten. But last up here, Rocco, I wanted to throw a long shot question at you, or maybe not even long shot, depending on your answer here. Odds to be a 1 seed. Auburn is going to be a 1 seed. They're a minus 200,000 favorite, I think, or 20,000 favorite to be a 1 seed according to FanDuel. Duke minus 9,000. Alabama minus 240. Houston minus 135. Then there's Tennessee plus 190. They go to Oklahoma this weekend. Florida plus 370. Iowa State plus 440. They're reeling a bit without Momcilovic. Purdue plus 950. Texas Tech plus 1,200. If you had to take any of those plus money teams, and again, you're not putting your money down, but any of those teams, according to Bracketeer.org, that you think have a legitimate shot, even if you want to throw out Texas Tech as a team that you think can continue their ride as arguably the hottest team in college basketball, just considering their wins of late, and their last loss was against Iowa State that they arguably should have won in regulation if they hit their free throws. Of those teams at plus money, Tennessee, Florida, Iowa State, Purdue, Texas Tech, which one, ceiling-wise, do you kind of like here down the stretch to maybe grab a number 1 seed?
Well, I think the important thing to say first is that 75 to 80% of the season's already in the book. And every time you take the floor, it's just one of your 31 pieces of pie for the season. So all we have left in runway, Eli, are these 8 or 9 pieces of pie to go to get to 31. And so for Texas Tech, you can't take away the loss to St. Joseph's. You can't take away the home loss to UCF. So no matter what they do from here, they're going to have to deal with that. And that's something that the other contenders don't have to deal with. So you got that. And I think that's that's the case for everybody. Now, I'd say the answer to your question is Tennessee. I'm a little surprised because they're already there. They've got the road win at Illinois. They got a road win at Louisville, both out of conference, both strong net teams. And your net matters for your opponents much more than yourself. So as long as Louisville and Illinois continue to be strong net teams, those are an amazing road wins to have out of conference. And they're, of course, picking up great wins as they go along in the SEC. I think the risk with Tennessee is they have 5 more road games to go. And every road game is tough, and they have some brutal ones. So can Tennessee weather the storm? That's kind of up to your opinion. But, Ken Palm cumulative says 6-2 in those last 8. If they do that, they're getting a 1. I mean, so if they just do what Ken Palm says, I think they're getting a 1. So I think that's your safest option. In terms of Florida, while we're in the SEC, they're really missing a heavy gold game, like we talked about with some other teams. And they're pretty clearly a 2 because of that. And they only have 2 more cracks at it. They have to get a win in the state of Alabama. They play both teams in that state. If they get either one of them.
At Auburn tomorrow.
At Auburn tomorrow, and then they'll get Alabama, I think, March 1st. So if Florida gets either one of those and they handle their normal business like they've been doing, they're very much alive. But if you don't believe they can go in there and win either of them, they're not getting there. There's simply no path. With Houston, they're the interesting one because they are easily a top 3 metrics team no matter which one you want to look at. Committee can look at whichever one they want, so you don't want to speculate too much. But the problem is the resume, of course. They just took a home loss to Texas Tech. And right now, their road opportunities left. They have an Arizona road trip, which Arizona net-wise is 11th. So that would be a big-time road win. If they get the Arizona State one, that would help too. Then they also have a road Baylor game and a road Texas Tech game. Here's the issue. If they go 4-0 in those 4 somehow, they're obviously going to be a 1 seed. But the chances of them going 4-0, I'll leave that up to you guys to quantify. And I think they're projected 7-2 to finish on KenPom, which is still a great finish, a strong 2 seed. But they almost would need to thread the needle. And the reason why is if they lose one of those, then it sets them back again resume-wise, and they got to go make up for it somewhere else. There's just probably not enough time to do so. They have an Iowa State home game, and they actually have a Baylor home game, so they still play Baylor twice. But Baylor's coming in at an 8 seed right now. So it's not like the traditional Baylor where that would be the huge opportunity. The huge opportunity could be with the revenge Texas Tech win if they can get that. But if they don't get that and the Arizona one, if they only get one or the other, I still don't think it's going to be enough in the end unless, Tennessee finishes 4-4 or something unexpected.
I like your Tennessee.
Go ahead.
Really quickly, I like your Tennessee take. If you go back from January 7th through January 28th, 6th percentile if you equate it to over the course of a full season and 3-point efficiency. And then we saw it last week against Florida. They finally hit some outside shots even without Zakai Ziegler in the lineup. And then Missouri, yes, they didn't cover the point spread of around 9.5, but 1.27 points per possession, shooting 66.7% from behind the arc. Lanier has gotten his shot back. Ziegler went 4 for 4 from deep in that one, and Milicic 2 of 3. You got to be able to space the floor 1 through 4 with that lineup with Milicic and Okpara at the 4-5 spot. So if Tennessee starts shooting well again, like they have in a 1 game or 2 game sample size, if you want to include the Florida blowout last weekend, I agree with you. I think plus money is a good bet, even with these road games coming up.
Yeah, so right now they're 6-3 in road neutral games, 3-3 in their biggest road games, and so they got 5 left. I think the key there is they got to win at least 2 of the 5, and maybe even 3. I think if they win 3, they're going to get there. If they win 2, there's still a path. So that's the upside. They go 1-4, 0-5 in those road games. They're probably slipping for sure. So, but again, just based on the fact that they've already got so much in the kitty, and they can only add to it. The other teams are looking to build a kitty. So it just depends on where your comfort level is with all that.
Absolutely. He is Rocco Miller. You can follow him on X at Rocco Miller 8, talking college hoops bracketology. Be sure to check out his latest bracketology projections at Bracketeer.org. Rocco, can't wait to have you back on, whether you like it or not, for the mid-major edition of Beat the Closing Number, talking college hoops mid-major conference tournaments. Always appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, thanks, Eli. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
That's going to do it for this edition of Beat the Closing Number, presented by thelines.com. Really appreciate everybody checking this one out with Justin Perri of Shot Quality and Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org. Lots of great information handicapping this weekend's games and beyond. If you're looking to bet the Super Bowl, be sure to check out play.thelines.com for our free big game jackpot contest. It's free, and you have a chance to win $25K, so why not enter at play.thelines.com. For Justin and for Rocco, I'm Eli Hershkovich. Check out my college basketball column at thelines.com for the weekend, and best bets at my Discord channel, our Discord channel, on thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. So long, everybody, and good luck with your weekend college basketball picks.